Hello, and welcome to the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation's Ask the Expert. I am Mike Knoppen, the Program Director for the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation, and I'm very pleased to invite you to this event. Today's Ask the Expert will focus on key neuropsychological features of DM1. About the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation, our vision is a world with treatments and a cure for myotonic dystrophy, and our mission is the community, care, and a cure. We support and connect the myotonic dystrophy community. We provide resources and advocate for care. We accelerate research toward treatments and a cure. For additional resources and support from the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation, please visit our website, myotonic.org. There you will find excellent resources like our toolkits and publications, myotonic.org/toolkits-publications. You can find support programs to connect and unite with others at myotonic.org/find-support. You can find a calendar of all of our events, not only support events, but other activities like these Ask the Expert sessions at myotonic.org/calendar/month. And you can find video recordings about all kinds of informational subjects and topics, including not only these Ask the Expert events, but our Meet the DM drug developer events, and many sessions from past conferences as well. This event is being recorded as well and will appear on the Digital Academy later. You can find this and others at myotonic.org/digital-academy. We're so pleased that we can have this event for you today, but this series is not over. We continue on the third Friday of almost every month this year at noon. Our May topic is still TBD. It's very exciting to have the opportunity to develop that program. In June, we will have a community portrait through surveys and insurance claims data. We're very pleased to have our friends from the Marigold Foundation presenting information on that topic. In July, we'll be speaking about DM and palliative care. A physician from Kansas City will be with us to talk about what palliative care is and is not, and how those services can impact and be helpful to the DM community. In August, we'll be joined by a disability rights expert and lawyer talking about DM and disability rights and future planning, including how one can create a special needs trust. You can register for each of these events. You do need to register for each event in the series by going to myotonic.org/ask-expert-series. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our expert today. Dr. Benjamin Gallais was a clinical psychologist in his home country of France, and then obtained his doctorate in clinical psychology from the Paris 8 University in 2010, where his dissertation project was on the psychological and neuropsychological consequences of DM1 and individuals' adaptation to the disease. After 3 years at the Reference Center for Neuromuscular Disorders in Paris, he moved to the Quebec to complete a postdoctoral internship with the Interdisciplinary Research Group on Neuromuscular Diseases in the Saguenay in order to deepen his knowledge of myotonic dystrophy type 1. To do so, he successfully received postdoctorate fellowships from the AFM and the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation. We're very pleased to have this fellow returning as our expert today. Today, his expertise in this neuromuscular disease is recognized internationally. Specializing in health psychology and neuropsychology, Dr. Gallais is interested in the characterization of personality and impairment of cognitive functions in neuromuscular diseases, their evolution, and their impact on autonomy and social participation. In addition, his work focuses on the consequences of problems with the central nervous system, such as fatigue and motivational disorders. Dr. Gallais joined the ÉCOBES team in 2018, and we're so pleased to have him here with us today. We received a number of questions through the registration process, but we want to hear from you today now as well. You can ask questions live if you're watching via desktop by opening the Questions tab, typing your question and clicking Send, or on your smartphone by clicking on the question mark icon at the top of the screen, typing your question and clicking Send. If today's program speaks to you, please consider showing your appreciation with a donation to the MDF so that we can continue programs like these and many others in advancing our mission. Together, we will change the future of myotonic dystrophy. You can make a donation at myotonic.org/donate. And now I'm very pleased to welcome our expert today, Dr. Ben Gallais.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for the invitation. Can you hear me well? Yes. So
yes, we can.
Thank you. I will share my my screen. No problem. So again, thank you so much, and thank you everybody to be present here. First of all, I'm sorry for my English. I'm a French-speaking person, and I hope you will be able to understand me anyway. So let's start with this key neuropsychological and psychological features in DM1. So as a presentation plan, I will start very briefly with generalities on DM1, and then we're going to pass through all these features, cognition, psychological impacts, apathy, fatigue, and sleepiness, and a few tips for try to manage all these difficulties that you may encounter. So, generalities, as you all know, I mean, there are many ways to describe or to differentiate the phenotypes in DM1. Let's start today with a proposition of 4 or 5 distinctive phenotypes. But what we should retain today is that, of course, if you see the age of onset, you know, the earlier the age of onset is, of course, you're going to have congenital or childhood or juvenile or adult or late onset phenotype. Why I'm saying it today is because, of course, we try as researcher, as clinician, to organize in phenotypes in order to help everybody out with comprehension, you know, of what kind of symptoms we may expect in an individual. But of course, it's gross, and it's you know, you have age, but sometimes, you know, if the onset start at 11 instead of 9, it doesn't mean that it's going to be so different. Or controversially, you can have an age of onset, 2 people with the same age of onset and 2 different manifestations of the disease. So, you know, it's kind of a help to understand altogether some typical manifestations. And also as something that we accept globally, but it is again individually more complex, you know, or different. But globally, let's say that the earlier the onset of the disease is, and you know, the greater impact it has on symptoms and features. And of course, you all know that DM1 is a very multi-systemic disease with problems in muscles, heart, eye, and so on, and the brain as well. And this is the reason why we're here today, to learn or to understand a little bit more about brain manifestations. So, just as a an ice breaking, there is a table of a work I've done during my dissertation, actually, so a long time ago. And I asked the main spontaneous complaints in 41 participants with DM1, adult onset DM1. And I asked them if you can only name one symptom, you know, so it's not a checklist. Do you have this? Do you have that? of course, the percentage of samples would have been higher, but here it's only one main symptom. What bothers you the most? And what we observed is that fatigue was the very first, with almost 1/3 of the participants saying that fatigue is the most, burdening symptom. And on the right, I pointed out what I think is pretty interesting. It's because when I put all together the symptoms that could be, covered by the name neuropsychological manifestations, we obtain 56.5% of the all symptoms named here. Also very interesting, fatigue, the first one, and sleepiness, all together, I mean, they count a lot, for people. More than one participant on two had a main complaint of fatigue or sleepiness. Another interesting fact, is that cognition, apathy, lack of motivation, and anxiety and depression was not even here. So cognition, apathy, and emotions were very rarely pointed out by patients themselves, which is understandable because it has been said and written that there is a kind of lack of awareness about this or those symptoms specifically. So I guess for people, and you will tell me many things after my presentation. I can't wait to discuss with you guys. But so let's say that cognition, memory, it's maybe the most expressed symptom, but motivation, anxiety, most of the time people, they don't express these symptoms. And contrastively, fatigue, sleepiness is very common. But it doesn't mean that there is no cognitive or motivation disturbances, of course. And let's start with cognition. A very rapid, a brief portrait of what may happen in each phenotype, each or some of the phenotypes, those that have been the most described in the scientific literature, of course. And in the bottom, you will see something very important for me, is that even though I put a list of symptoms here or manifestations, it doesn't mean that everybody living with DM1 will have all these features. And also, as I said in the introduction, phenotypes, they are more like a continuum, which means that maybe you will see something that it's not in the list of your phenotype, and you will say, oh, I think I have this. Or, for example, no, I don't think I have this, but you put it in the list, okay? So it's more like a continuum. So in the congenital phenotype, it has been said, and and clinicians agree with this, that we frequently observed reading, writing. It's more than difficulties. Sometimes, children may not be able to read or write at all. We observe a language delay, communication difficulties, behavioral difficulties, and there are articles describing autism spectrum conditions. So this is something that you may observe in your children, and you are asking yourself, is it something related to DM1 or not? You have the answer that it really could be. Of course, there are sometimes disagree. People disagree in the scientific world. Is it real, autism or something different? But we talk now about a spectrum of autism conditions, and DM1 has actually some patients or some children, have the manifestations of something that could be related to autism spectrum conditions. Sorry. in the childhood phenotype. So again, congenital in childhood, I would say that, this is two of the most, difficult to separate. We talk sometime of a congenital-like childhood phenotype or juvenile adult-like childhood phenotype. So it looks like in the childhood phenotype you have two different kinds of global manifestations. So, but if I want to be brief, I would say that we observed often attention difficulties, and attention difficulties in many ways, so it could be difficulty to focus attention or to switch, because in the environment there is a new stimuli that should be important, but the child will not pay attention to this. He will stay on the same on the same stimuli, and also difficulty in inhibition attention, which is controversially of what I just said. It is that sometimes you have to focus on, let's say, the teacher speech, and there is a noise somewhere that you should inhibit. You should not pay attention to this. Unconsciously, your brain will say to you, you don't have to pay attention to this, or sometimes a brief attention, but that you go back to what the teachers say. And unfortunately, in DM1 children, most of the time, very frequently we observe this deficit in inhibition of what is not necessary to focus on, which of course leads to even more difficulties at school, even more than what should be explained only by pure cognitive difficulties. We also observe the working memory, which I can tell you will makes difficulties and lead to difficulties in mathematics, for example, because how can you treat, a mathematic problem if you don't remember the beginning of the sentence, or if you have to deal with 2 or 3 simple calculus, but you don't remember what was the first one, it's going to be very difficult. And we observe also, and this is even more frequent, visuospatial difficulties, which is that, when you have something on the plan, when you have something even on a sheet, and that it's a drawing, for example, it's very difficult to select the right information, to organize, this visual spatial information, which will, of course, lead to difficulties in geometry, for example. If you ask yourself, is sorry, I put it in French, ADHD instead of TDAH. So ADHD, yes, it has been reported that ADHD is a common comorbid, a symptom or syndrome of childhood phenotype DM1. So again, is it because strictly related to DM1 brain manifestations mimics the cognitive deficit observed or described in ADHD? Maybe there is not enough research, in my opinion, but still, let's say that the manifestations that relate to ADHD are commonly observed in children with the childhood phenotype. Of course, because as parents, you may know that in both congenital and childhood, there are social relations, difficulties to enter into a social relationship and to maintain social relationship. And in adults, and I'm more specialized in adult actually, but it is sometimes more subtle, I would say. It's not so obvious the cognitive impacts of the disease. But when people are performing a task, then you realize that there is something that may be wrong. So for example, processing speed, which means that there is a slowness, not only a slowness in muscle and in when you do manual activities. There is a processing slowness, so the brain doesn't perform as fast as it should be. So when you do an intellectual task, sometimes it is slower than it could be or should be. There are problems with mental flexibility. So as you will see that everything is related altogether, mental flexibility is a cognitive symptom that say that, again, a little bit like attention, it is a difficulty. For example, when you start something, it's difficult to observe, for your brain to observe what's going on around and change, the plans to adapt and to cope with the environment, the changes in the environment. But when I said that everything is related, it's because if I ask you about personality, maybe you will say that, oh yes, there is also a lack of flexibility, a rigidity, and so what is in French, we say, what is the the chicken or with the egg, Anyway, it's personality and cognition. You will see further in the presentation that it's very related. So anyway, this mental flexibility is something very common also in adult DM1. Difficulties in organization, planification, and also emotions recognition, and which leads to social interpersonal abilities that are lacking sometimes, and decision taking. Actually, decision taking, I should have put it in all the phenotypes with, again, more and more uh, difficulties the more you go to early onset. And unfortunately, sometimes it leads to very bad decisions. And many parents actually came to me and complained about bad decisions that could make everybody, the person itself and the family around, in a very tricky situation, financially, or trusting somebody that is untrustful. I guess you understand what I mean by that. So the evolution, you may ask yourself, is it stable? You said there is these features, and how does it go with time? So few, but some longitudinal studies showed a decline in cognitive functions in adult phenotypes. For example, attention may be even more difficult with time. Processing speed, also the slowness may be even slower with time. Visual spatial visual construction, visual verbal memory, and executive functions, iPad plus and minus, because depending on the studies, some studies said yes, there is a decline. Some others showed no, there is no decline. So it's all about which person do you include in your study, how long do you observe them. So yes, let's say that it's possible decline in memory and executive functions. For example, we my team and I, we conducted a study with a 9-year evolution, and we observed, you see here T1 is baseline. So here you see, the level of difficulty and each cognitive ability assessed. And just to make it brief, 9 years later, what happened? So the full scale intellectual performance strangely get normalized. We have many hypotheses for that, but let's focus on this. So processing speed, which was normal, 9 years later became within a mild impairment, and visual attention speed, which was actually normal, went in the moderate impairment level, which means that specifically these two features, manifestations, declined a lot. For the rest, it's pretty stable, but it's 9 years, So again, yes, there is a decline, but it's a slow progression. So far, the studies has been about 5, 7, 9, or 11 years, which is actually a long time. So it's not supposed to decline fastly. But if I look further at the results of our study, I can see two phenomena, which are one, as I said, depending on the cognitive symptom, some are very stable, some are supposed to decline more. And also I've seen great heterogeneity between individuals, which means that's, for half of my participants, it didn't, decline. And for others, in 9 years, there have been a big decline. So unfortunately, so far we don't know yet exactly why somebody is declining more. And but all I can say, is that there may be a threshold, which means that if you have a high level of impairment, it won't decline so much in a decade, but still many studies to do to make sure of what we can say. But a thing that I have to say, and I'm sorry, I don't want to be the bad news provider, but we observed that there is a decline also in late onset um, people living with DM1. And I have to admit that what I have seen clinically is that most of the time it is most impactful for individuals on employment and mental health. Why? It's pretty easy and stereotype maybe, but it's because at 50, when you never had cognitive difficulties, and suddenly you start to feel that at work or everything, in daily life, you feel that it's not the same anymore, then it has an impact. You get anxious, and you have to face work difficulties. Controversially, inversely, if somebody has always lived with DM1 and doesn't work and stay at home and has the support of his family, maybe he will not be so much impacted by a decline. You understand? So we will talk about it face to face later on, but I think it is something that I should say on what we observed. Okay, and in the childhood phenotype, I'm sure many parents and many individuals are asking themselves about that. So far, unfortunately, only one study, longitudinal study, but it's very encouraging because it showed that in a context of no decline in intellectual performance, they showed actually a certain level of improvements in communication, socialization, and daily living skills, which means that compared to norms, to normative data, um, you know, these features, these categories were less well performed when they were children, but years after, when they grow up and they are older, young adolescents, young adults, they are better in these skills. So this is very encouraging. However, we, my team again, and I, we performed 2 studies recently, asking ourselves, what about children when they become adults? Because even the longitudinal study I've been talking right before, it was children. We follow them during 10 years, and some of them are, adolescents or young adults, some of them, but the other are maybe 12, 13, 14. So what we aim to was to answer this question. Let's take individuals living with DM1 with a childhood phenotype, and let's see what's going on when they are adults. And I'm talking about 25 to 60 years old. And so we had a preliminary study where we observed difficulties in instrumental activities of daily living. Instrumental, which means that, when you're in your daily activities, you have basic one, like brushing the tooth, clothes, and etc. And you have instrumental that require a higher level of, cognitive functioning. So, for example, money management, social adjustment, organizing the plan, for example, all the meals for the week, or plan the activities, social activities, etc. Those are instrumental activity. And we observed high level of difficulties in money management and social adjustment. We looked at autonomy in a positive way, and only one participant on 11 required no help at all in all the categories. But strength, we observed that 60, 70%, we have a very small group of participants, but let's say that most of them were independent, autonomous on memory and orientation. And we observed apathy was present in these people. But let's go to the other article that are actually published last week. So and here again, so this time we did similarly the same thing, but with a greater number of participants, 33, and we find again major difficulties in financial management, health and security, how I can take care of my health, and do I know how to be secure in everyday life. And also to formulate a goal was one of the most activity with difficulties. Autonomy, again, memory orientation was pretty good in most of the patients and the participants. Sorry, and clothes and shoes was pretty good. Also, people were independent for that. So, what we observed, what is to remember, is that sorry for apathy, it's not 5 on it's about 40-50% of the 33 participants, sorry, that had a clinical apathy. So what we should remain is that DM1 people were more dependent in complex activities. So and it makes sense. The activities that require executive functions were difficult to do by themselves. Okay, and here another interesting thing is that people with clinical apathy they were more dependent. They were more dependent on support, on human support. And so, and another interesting thing is that in most cases, participants required assistance to perform an activity. And another important thing is that this assistance actually was more verbal than physical. And this is a thing that, of course, as a neuropsychologist, I want to say it loud. And I think that it will be impacting also the world of of doctors and neurologists. In DM1, when you live with a childhood phenotype and you grow up and you become an adult, you need assistance, you need support, and most of the time you need it as verbal assistance from your caregivers and more than physical assistance. So which it's not the same for insurance and everything. It's not the same to say, oh, it's a neuromuscular disease, you will need physical assistance. No. The cognitive impact makes people needing verbal assistance to Actually, most of the time it was to plan, to formulate a goal. Okay, for example, we come in the house at 9 o'clock, talk, talk, talk. Yes, it's Dr. Gallais for the research. So what you should do? It's 9 o'clock. And we assessed, we observed and we assessed. Oh, I don't know. Okay. Did you have breakfast? Oh, no, you're right. I should have breakfast. Okay. Did you wash yourself? No, etc., etc. So if you prompt people and you organize and you say you should maybe do that and that, then most of the time they are able to do it. And I'm sure many caregivers here, they understand what I mean again. But we have as scientists to say it and to write articles on that, so you guys can claim for more assistance. So what does depression look like in DM1? So I will do a very brief, I always say that and I speak, I'm sorry, but depression, what is depression and what is DM related depression? Maybe it's not the same. So major depression in DM1 most of the time is of episodic nature, which means that it occurs in relation to specific and realistic, actual situations related to the condition. Those, of course, the diagnosis in you, in a person or a relative, of course, when you realize the diagnosis, it's a shock. So you may have episodic depression, the evolution of the disease, a new problem. Okay, you go to the doctor and they tell you that you have a respiratory problem, etc., etc. So, and major day-to-day issues, of course, may lead to emotional disturbances. And like, for example, problems at school, at work, difficulties in finding a partner, etc., etc. So, and these brief periods of sadness or uneasiness in certain situations are normal. You have to understand that it could be normal. And with the pandemic, now we talk a lot about mental health, and it's very important. But we should not forget that emotions, it's not a roller coaster, but it can go a little bit down, for a while. And if it's related to something realistic that happens in your life, it is normal, okay? But depression and anxiety, these are medical conditions that require a treatment, okay? And most of the time it's distressing, it's persistent, and it disrupts day-to-day functioning. Those are the signs that something is wrong. So very fast, so depression, you get down. Anxiety, most of the time you're worried and your brain is keyed up, and you're very alert, which sometimes after a while leads to more fatigue, because it's hard for your brain to are always restless. But in DM1, things get a little bit more complex. Sorry about that. Because some people call it the invisible handicap that could mimic major depression. So the chronic state of the disease, these features are brain related, maybe directly caused by DM. And what are the manifestations of these DM related depressions? Lack of emotion, negative and positive emotions. Sometimes people living with DM1, they are experiencing something good, a birthday in the family or something like that, but there is no reaction, okay? This is sometimes typical. Apathy, fatigue, we will explain that later on. All these features are very DM related, but for somebody that doesn't know DM1 at all, it looks like depression, okay? So it's been a lot of work in researchers to understand that yes, there is depression in DM1, of course, like in everybody, but you also have this individual, invisible handicap and these features that looks like depression, and sometimes people are not depressed. Usually what I do is I ask people, do you feel that you have no value? Do you have, darkness, dark thoughts? And do you feel guilty for something? If you answer no to these three questions, but you still are slow and fatigued and no emotions, then it is DM-related depression. And of course, thinking problems also. So all you, as you can see, cognitive problems, apathy, fatigue, it's all about DM1. But unfortunately, in depression, people without DM1 will have these features. So it's difficult to differentiate. So apathy is present, and it's a lack of initiative, a lack of interest in activities, emotions, care, and that's daily care and also health care, related to a DM1. Sometimes you have to push somebody living with DM1, to push him or to kick the ass, as we say in French, sorry, hey, you have to go to see the doctors, it's for you. But the person itself sometimes has no willing to go see the doctor and see what's going on with its own health, So it disrupts healthcare sometimes. It leads to treatment non-compliance. We all know the machine, the ventilation machine that will stay in the corner or in the closet during 1 year, whereas it could help the people and the individuals to breathe better, to feel less sleepiness. But I think it's so beautiful that it should stay on the table instead of using it at night. And source of distress among couples, of course, apathy is actually more, as I said in the introduction, it's there are more complaints of apathy from lovers and the caregivers than from the person itself, because for the person itself it doesn't really matter that I don't do anything. They are not aware of that, and they don't want more than this, so it's burdensome for partners. And it affects about 40 to 60% of adults of DM1, depending on the studies again. And they are very interesting, but I see the time running, and I'm sorry. So, but there are beautiful articles where you can see things about DM1. If my wife suggests, "Shall we go on holiday?" Then I say, "Okay, you say where, because I don't care." And she doesn't like that. She says that you can think of what you like, and things like that. Another man with DM1, because you are at home most of the time, your world becomes smaller, which is very annoying for me. So this is a case of somebody that seems apathetic, but is aware of that, which is pretty rare. And a woman partner said, "What can be postponed was postponed. It completely irritated me," of course. So you see here the impact on partners. And fatigue is it occurs in most of people with DM1. This is the second most important complaint and had the greatest effect on DM1 patients' life, according to a survey. Excessive daytime sleepiness. It's slightly less frequent, but only slightly. It's very frequent in most of people living with DM1. And just like that, for a tip, how to recognize fatigue versus EDS. For me, after reading many definitions, I would say that fatigue is a complex and overwhelming feeling that one is lacking energy. So most of the time, it's more a lack of something than too much something. And so it could be physical, intellectual, and or emotional energy. When EDS is an urge to fall asleep in situations that is inappropriate. For example, falling asleep in class for children or during social events, you know. So maybe you're fatigued before to go to the social event, but when you wake up, for example, or after an hour, you say, I already have no energy. But then you go to an event, if you go, and then you fall asleep. So these are the two difference. I mean, you know, it's different, but both can coexist, unfortunately, in individuals with DM1. So there are many impacts, of course, on social and quality of life. And again, you know, fatigue is sometimes it's complex because, as this person says, it's a roller coaster. Some days I'm fine, the day after I'm not. So how can I anticipate and plan something? You know, can freeze plans. So I will pass on that, but you all know that it's burdensome. What does anxiety look like in DM1? Irritability, poor self-esteem, fearfulness that will lead to avoidant behavior. Example, fear of falling. I avoid stairs. I diminished walking, and then it leads to inactivity. Is it inactivity because of, you know, the loss of strength and muscular, or is it avoidance because of anxiety and fear? Sometimes it's very complex to distinguish. It has been also, when you're anxious, you have excessive physical preoccupations, you know, looking like hypochondria, and social inhibition. Fear for the future. So I will pass on it, and if we have questions. So, but what's the impact on caregivers? I think it's very important to talk about it. So worse general well-being, more anxiety, when people are have a lack of initiative. Sometimes people say that there is a social isolation because we have to reduce social activities for the partner, the DM1 partner. The caregiver will also withdraw and realize that they have a social isolation. So what we would say as tips for caregivers, a general one is that try to attend appointments if, of course, the patient allows, because you can bring up concerns about patients' emotional health, and you can also, you know, describe the symptoms that you have observed, because as I said, you know, the lack of awareness, you know, leads sometimes to DM1 people saying that everything is okay to the neurologist or to the doctor, you know. So you are here to say that no, maybe there is this and this and that. Very important. But also, it's important to take good care of yourself, you know, alone time, you know, get help if you feel overwhelmed, and inquire, I mean, about community resources to assist you. And finding the right balance. I know it is hard. Should I help, or should I do in place of my partner that will lose little by little, you know, initiative if I do everything? So it's, I know it's complex. So very fastly, depression and anxiety, you can treat it, and the best is have an integrative approach to treatment, and we will pass on that, and if we have questions. But you know, you can change lifestyle, you know, bring modification. There are medication, emotional and psychotherapy are very important too. And what I think is that it may also work for all the symptoms. For example, psychostimulants are used for attention disorder, for sleepiness. Does it work for fatigue? Does it work for apathy? These are questions that I'm asking myself, and we should study that. And CBT, cognitive behavioral therapies, is a kind of psychotherapy. Have shown its impact on reducing fatigue and enhancing levels of activity, and also aerobic exercise and good sleep habits. They all may diminish, fatigue and sleepiness. So if we work together, and that maybe a while you take psychostimulants, you engage in CBT therapy, and you change your lifestyle habits, maybe it could have a great impact on some DM1 related manifestations. And a reminders list could help people, because of organization planification problems. You can give telephone calls during the day to prompt actions. Sometimes caregivers, they are at work, but they can do the things that we've done for the study. It's 9 o'clock. What have you done? What you should do? Okay, I call you back in 2 hours. What have you done? What should be done? Etc., etc. And of course, treatment in groups for caregivers themselves to address common problems, challenges, and find solution all together. And it's going to be an emotional support. So here we go, and I think we could stop with that. I just have briefly the patterns I have met during my career, the impact of DM1, neuropsychological symptoms on employment. You have two main patterns, and maybe, of course, much more, but one, difficulties at school. So most of the time in childhood and juvenile phenotypes, most of the time, the scholar pathway early orientate, the future job or even lack of job. But when there are occupations, most of the time we choose manual occupations because, the young, they withdraw from school. And sometimes it's adapted, protected jobs. But what I would say is that we should be aware and anticipate, that one day the functional handicap may progress and lead to difficulties to perform this kind of work too. So you have to work all together with social workers and occupational therapists to think early what could be appropriate now and in the future. And another system that happens a lot is that the functional handicap versus progressive brain-related science, which means that in adult and late onset phenos, most of the time, the disease progress, the myotonia and the muscular impairment. So we propose professional reorientation, and I've seen a lot of people becoming secretary, So you sit down, there is no problem with your muscular impairment, but be aware because, as we said, the invisible handicap may also progress and should be considered, because I remember many ladies said, oh, I changed my work. I was moving a lot and now I am on my desk. I give phone calls and everything. Yes, but now I feel very fatigued all the time because I have, two phones to answer at the same time and everything. So just think about the disease, the muscular impairments, but also be aware that fatigue and cognition may also appear one day. So here is the thing. Sorry, it's been so long. Mike, do you have a...
Yes, Dr. Gallais, thank you so much. That is just an incredible picture of the community and what folks are enduring and some ideas about solutions. It won't surprise you to know that we have a lot of folks asking about interventions. One individual asks if you could maybe speak a little bit more about, for parents of children especially, or parents of young adults, the ideas or tactics or strategies for finding that balance between empowering them and providing the push, as you said, to help them achieve what they need to. Could you speak about that?
Well, no, that I understand. I totally understand, and I would say that now, clinicians that work day to day in neuromuscular centers, maybe they are more able to talk about it than me, because for a while I've been focusing on studies and see the gap in the literature and what should I do, what should I try, what should I study and observe. But so it's a very difficult, it's complex to answer. I'm sorry, I don't want to to avoid it. It's just that it's it's depending a lot of this, in the situation of the families. Is the parents are working as the parents, are they involved in the community, or do they feel very, very isolated? It's all about that. But so I could only give global, global tips, like I already said. It's just that always think that you cannot support somebody if you are yourself in difficulty, so emotionally, physically, but of course I will say emotionally, like if you feel yourself very fatigued and stressful, you won't be able to help somebody as you could. So always think about it, and when you think that you're giving a lot as a support, because you think that you should deprive yourself, and it's glorious, it's good, but at the same time, just remember that, okay, maybe I think I can do everything for my child, but maybe if I do less and more for me, I will be even more helpful for him. So it's very global. I'm very sorry about it, but what I mean is, it's that if you can try, to have at least, part-time or small-time occupation because you like it and you are motivated, you should not feel guilty to do that. If you need to go out with friends, you should not feel guilty to do that. This is the main thing that I would say. And if you don't know how to deal with it, of course, I will not be able to tell you, but you can seek for support, and psychologists, for example, or counselors, they are very good in this. They will assess what you do in your life, what is your environment, what are your hopes and goals, and what do you deprive from that because you want to help more and more your child.
Thank you, Dr. Gallais. We had some more questions about psychological interventions. So first, I think, could you speak about whether and when you suggest people find counselors or psychologists to help? And secondly, is there something particular people should look for when they find a counselor or therapist, or how would they go about that?
That's very interesting. I'm biased by my own function, but as a psychologist in the past, even though now I do only research, but I would say that there is no good moment, or there are only good moments, which means that you should not wait to have symptoms. You should not wait to have a distress. You should not, I think that when you feel that a support could be helpful or valuable, you're ready to go. Okay. And most of the time, actually, it is better to have a psychological support uh, before, an actual event. Let's say, for example, that I'm frightened about when my child will not be able to go to school anymore, or I'm afraid that I can see these respiratory problems getting worse. Don't wait the moment where it will be very overwhelming for you. Maybe you can start to work with a psychologist or a counselor before that, so you are prepared, you will anticipate, and you will work on your strength before that the event is just a wave on you. Okay, so that's one of the best tip I think I could provide. And is there anything better than others? Actually, in the M1, there is no study on what are the best interventions, but actually, we are some experts that are gathering soon to think on this. So maybe I'll be better to tell you something about it next year. But still, we have Christopher Graham, who came earlier this year, talk about ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. I think it's a good opportunity. I mean, for people living with chronic diseases, because most of the time we see that when you're distressed, it's because you're fighting. You don't accept it. So I think it's a new kind of therapy that is very encouraging in my opinion, because it will help you. It's not, resignation. It's just, okay, I have this and that, and how can I do to let it go and try to focus on something else that I have stopped to focus on. What are my values? What are my goals? And so that could be very interesting, but I would not say that there is one intervention that is better than another. For caregivers, for example, you can have a face-to-face, psychotherapy is very classic that will listen more than speak, and sometimes it's good. What I would say is try and don't hesitate to meet and try interventions, and to stop it and go see something else. I always say that you have to find the right person and find the right kind of intervention for yourself. Maybe there was another question inside and I forgot, sorry.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Gallais. That was very helpful. And for our audience, Dr. Gallais is referring to Dr. Christopher Graham, who spoke recently for the MDF. You can find that video on the MDF website of Dr. Graham speaking about acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, as Dr. Gallais described. We had another question related to seeking psychological interventions from a professional, related to perhaps an unaffected caregiver trying to get a child or partner who is affected, but who is reluctant to participate in therapy with the caregiver. What do you suggest in that situation?
Well, that's a tough one actually, but I totally understand the question, and sometimes we just have to say that we don't know, and I think I'm facing this situation. You know what I would say? I mean, I have no answer, and I don't know. I mean, what I've seen is that with DM1 individuals that are sometimes actually reluctant to seek for help. I don't know if in this question it's specific for psychotherapy, because we observe that in anyone there are many people that just don't want to hear about psychotherapy. But in DM1, sometimes every kind of intervention, it's people are reluctant. And is it apathy? Is it mental rigidity? As I said, it's all mixed up. But what I have observed is that when the link, when the connection, the human connection and the trust is bonding with a professional, it's gold. So maybe I would pass by somebody that people living with DM1 that would have confidence into. It could be nurse, could be occupational therapist, it could be the neurologists. Try to take somebody that has a good bond, and try to pass throughout this person or this professional to talk about the possibility and the benefits of psychotherapy. That would be my tip.
Thank you, Dr. Gallais. Another related question on the topic of apathy, as well as what you described as some individuals with DM it's unsure, we're uncertain of certain individuals' self-awareness about the psychological symptoms that they may have. Can you speak to our caregiver and other family community members about what they can do? And I think you already said, seeking professional help, of course, is an option, but what else can they do to help their family members that they feel might be apathetic, or that they feel are unaware of their emotional changes or impact? What can a caregiver do? What is the role of a loved one in those circumstances?
Again, a very good question. Not easy. Actually, again, the same answer. I am conducting actually research on that specifically, so I will be very more productive in few months, because we are asking people, actually caregivers, what are their strategies. So because personally, I don't think I'm an expert for that. I can describe apathy, I can assess apathy, but then experts are caregivers, and we are asking them what they are doing anyway. But and so far, actually, it's what we observe is that the people, they don't have a lot of strategies actually, and they are looking for strategies just as this question. So I'm very sorry, because this is where I feel very frustrated, being an expert and not knowing exactly how can we help in daily life. But and it's almost a philosophical question, because where is the limit? When and why should I take off this lack of awareness to somebody? Maybe when they are in danger, when there is no self-care, yes. For the rest, I don't know. But still, I'm sorry about that. Of course, I may discuss about it a long time, but I have no all written answers. I mean, what I've seen, what I've experienced is that I'm not talking about awareness, but how you can go around apathy. Some of the strategies used by people is to make the partner, the DM1 partner, to make them, to face them. I mean, confront them. Sorry, to a situation. For example, somebody said, we have to go there, and it's okay. And then, oh, now we are here. Look who is here. Your friend, blah blah. Let's take a drink with him. To confront them, because what we observe is that in apathy, most of the time it's lack of initiative. They don't, people, they don't really want to plan an activity and organize. But when they are confronted to the situation, most of the time they enjoy it, and they say that, yes, I would do it again. But again, they won't do it again if you don't force them. So just don't hesitate most of the time to push a little bit further, to make things happen. And then most of the time, but most of the time, then people enjoy it. But awareness, what I would say again, it's to confront. Also, it's another confrontation, but to confront with very realistic situations. Like, okay, see that, see how long have you been spending time on this couch watching TV? Well, 8 years, 6 years, yeah, sorry, 8 hours, 6 hours. Okay, what do you think? Ask questions. What do you think? I mean, do you think it's normal? Do you think it's good? What else could we do? What else could you have done, etc., etc.? These kind of questions may help people to realize, instead of confronting. So confront with reality, but instead of accusate, instead of oh, again on the sofa, on the couch, again on TV. No, it doesn't help. Just ask question and make people realize little by little that maybe there are other options that what they are doing. It's a beginning of a tip, but I think it's not easy, and you can talk with occupational therapists that may have experience with this, and but it's not easy to find. I understand, but I will come with more cues in 1 year. I swear.
Thank you, Dr. Gallais. We had a question from a mother of a young child. If you could speak a little bit to the extent you are aware, the psychological development of children with DM, the parent was curious whether there's any understanding about when children have DM, they're diagnosed very young or they're born with DM and they have psychological impacts. Is there a period when their maturity sort of stops continuing, stops evolving? And so they will sort of be, the parent can sort of expect that, where they are with their child is where that child will remain? Or is there some knowledge that, children will continue to evolve in maturity? The parents specifically asking about sort of behavioral maturity questions.
No, that's again, it's a very good question. As I said, things on evolution are, I mean, studies are very rare. And again, very honest with my limits. I'm more specialized with adults. As a clinician, I've seen adults only. And for example, we have Nathalie Anjar, and that is very specialized about development. So I guess other people would be more helpful with this. But what we observe is it's heterogeneous. Again, I'm very sorry because it's not a frank answer, but I've seen actually receiving adults with childhood or even congenital phenotypes. I've seen people that were able actually to be mature and have an autonomic life. So it does happen. Now I don't have in the studies and enough experience in young people to answer to it, unfortunately. What is the frequency and what should we expect for? Unfortunately, I'm not the person for that. I'm very sorry.
No, thank you, Dr. Gallais. We really appreciate your honesty and the way that you have affirmed this community so much. We really
And
appreciate that.
yeah, I don't know. It's not promotional. It's just that I met somebody during MDF actually Congress and everything. It's Anne Woodbury, and she wrote a book on and she said a lot of how how his children has evolved and what does it, I mean, how it impacts her life, but also how she coped with this. So I think it could be very interesting for people, the point of view of somebody living also with but somebody who has been all around the world to take information and everything. So but yeah, sorry to not know more about that.
No, Dr. Gallais, I think one thing I'm hearing you say in that comment too is that there's a lot of wisdom and empowerment in caregivers and parents and families meeting
Yep.
together. And so perhaps one way we can make that sort of multi-pronged uh, approach is to include, MDF support groups and other kinds of support into our plan of self-care and care for our families.
Totally. Actually, I passed pretty fast on the last slides, but it was written just like that. Yeah, it's always I mean, group support and as I said, to share experiences, to share strategies. It's always a very good solution. And sometimes the only limit or obstacle you can face is that your own shyness or guilt, or sometimes you don't want to be confronted with other living the same experience. But once you are passing over it, you will see the great contribution and benefits that it could have on you. And I'm most of the time I don't answer what I don't know. It's because I'm a lot of evidence-based approach. So if there is no evidence, sometimes I'd rather not say something. I'm not a good politician for that. Most of the time they say whatever they think, but me it's the contrary. But what I would say is that don't, after when I describe the things, but what I think is that we have a lot to learn from autism spectrum, and older, neurodevelopmental disorders where there are a lot of interventions going on. Okay, and for example, and so maybe we should look better on that, to help children. For example, I tell you names like this. It's integrated psychological therapy and other things like that, cognitive enhancement therapy, it's people that have think about, neuropsychologists, and they have think about how we can help young people with schizophrenia. I'm not saying that, there is schizophrenia in DM1, but all these social cognitive impairments that in developmental, maybe it could be helpful in DM1. We should try it. And this is the thing that I want to study more and more in the future, So does it help a DM1 child, a child with DM1, sorry, to participate in this kind of group where we're gonna teach them how you recognize emotions, how you recognize, the roles of social participation, and train them, So I think this is sometimes we should look around and text good things that are done in other disorders. And this is why I describe a lot. It's just to say, yeah, DM1 is that, but maybe, we can find interventions from another or some other disorders that look like ourselves, like ADHD, there's a lot of interventions. So if your child with DM1 has symptoms that looks like ADHD, or even sometimes we have a diagnosis of ADHD, so maybe you can ask for solutions that have been developed for ADHD. Okay, I should stop talking now, but I think we should be aware of all that that is done. And my aim is to study this intervention and see if they are efficient or not. And as long as I don't do it, I don't propose. But I think now I should relax a little bit and tell you, yeah, go try, go as a parent, try everything that is looking like DM1 and see if you can, if it's benefic for your child.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gallais. We have several more questions for you. I'll try to go through these quickly.
Okay.
We had some questions about other diseases or diagnoses, such as paranoia, psychosis, and schizophrenia, whether or not those are, there are any symptoms from those conditions that arise due to myotonic dystrophy, or what we know about the connections between other psychological disorders and DM?
Totally, yes. Yes, and I said the word schizophrenia, and I don't want to frighten people or to but what we observe, not me specifically, but what scientists have 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 written about is that, yeah, we find a prevalence of characteristics that are schizoid personality, which a little bit looks like schizophrenia, hypersensibility, difficulties to trust people, and things like that. Paranoid also a little bit, yes. So most of the time what we observe is that the level, there are threats in individuals, and it is more rare when there is a diagnosis of a schizophrenia or a paranoid personality, things like that, So, but some studies have, they have shown uh, prevalence of diagnoses that were a little bit more than in a normal population. Some people, they failed in showing it, but they said that there are specific threats. So it all depends on also on the theory underlying the study. But yes, let's say that if you are said by a doctor or psychiatrist that somebody with DM1 has these traits or even has this personality, it could be related to DM1 because it has been it has been shown in more than 1, 2, or 3 papers. So I think we should consider it. Again, why it has not been very well described, but we know nowadays that we don't talk only about psychology, psychiatry as psychoanalysis or things like that. The more and more the evolution of science make us realize that we talk about neuropsychiatry, and neuropsychiatry means that brain involvement, brain damages, brain development can be associated to personality disorders. So I think that it could be possible that the brain, the brain manifestations during, the development, we observe cognitive symptoms, but we may also, psychiatric manifestation may be related to DM1 too.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gallais. We have a few individuals from the DM2 community joining us, wondering what you could say about the connections between these topics today and DM type 2.
Oh, Mike, we what I can say is that there are many papers trying to compare, and globally, and I'm not an expert at all, I'm sorry. I have so many interests that, at the end of the day, I can't look at everything. But what I would say is that looking specifically at DM1, I've been passing through many papers that try to compare both. And what I remember, and it's not specific and it's not expertized. What I remember is the manifestations that we observe mainly in adult phenotypes. So everything I've described, we find it in DM1 too, but at a lesser extent. That's what I would say today, and I think we have also experts and papers, and but I can't say more about DM2. I'm very sorry.
Thank you so much for that. You have spoken a bit about personality today and how personality can be affected. We had some questions inviting you to say a little bit more about the effect of DM on personality.
Yes, just as personality and psychiatric disorders are very close. Actually, it is just a conceptual approach that makes you have a descriptive psychopathology, which is psychiatry, and sometimes all the people talking more about biopsychosocial conceptual view of psychopathology, and which is personality and the traits. They will not say that you have this or that psychiatric disorder, but you have traits and you have personality traits. But so they are pretty similar, and but again, yes, some personality traits have been highlighted more specifically in DM1, and I've made a review in the past about that, so I should just open it because I don't remember everything. But again, what I remember also, it's you have one thing, it's the social avoidance. Social avoidance is always at a greater prevalence than any other threats. So you have a lack of cooperativeness, and all these words to say that what we should remember is, yes, there are some particular threats, which means that there is a lack of flexibility. What is a personality trait when it go over the threshold? It is that you lack of flexibility, and you will have a kind of reaction in any situations. Instead of being very flexible and adaptive, people with personality traits means that they will not adapt and they will answer to a certain situation, and this situation always with the same reaction. So when it is said most of the time, and I can look here because I say it's we observed a tendency to neurotism, which is hostility and how can I say it in in English? I'm sorry, but hostility, fear, and a tendency to to not accept the point of view of other people. And we also have a lack of cooperativeness, agreeableness, which means that again, it is a difficulty to communicate, to accept other point of view, and to be friendly and nice. And so in daily life, what is it? It is actually everything is related, as I said. So if you said that the individual with DM1 sometimes have difficulty to trust the doctor, or to even go to the doctor, or even take, the interventions or the treatments that have been said to be taken. It's because of these personality traits, actually. So it is the lack of confidence in other, the tendency to not accept, what people say for them, but only what people consider is good for them. And at the end of the day, again, it's all about lack of flexibility and mental rigidity. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gallais. We also had a question about, bringing this back to the connection between the mind and the body. Do we know anything about a correlation between repeats, in the genes and severity of psychological symptoms?
Yes. So two things. Psychological, lack of studies, but still interesting things. For example, we observed that the more is the severity in the brain and in the CTGs, the less we observe emotional disturbances. So it's like the hypothesis of a protective syndrome, which means that if when the brain is very affected, then the lack of awareness is present, and so or thus there is almost no depression. So this is one thing. And clinically, I have observed it, and as I said, for the cognitive symptoms, it's the same. If you have only slight cognitive symptoms and suddenly you're facing difficulties, then you will become anxious and possibly depressed. But when you have, lack of maturity in some cases, how can I say, intellectual deficiency, things like that, most of the time there is no depression associated. And when you look at the brain, it's because some areas that helps people, to understand the environment and to realize that something is wrong. When it's touched, actually, it means that the lack of awareness is here, and most of the time there is no depression. So this is one aspect. And a secondary aspect is, I don't remember what I wanted to say. Sorry. Tell me again the question rapidly. Please,
It was
Mike.
about whether or not there's a correlation between
Yeah.
the number
So
of repeats.
okay, yeah. So psychologically, this is one thing, and on cognitive functions and things like that, it is not clear. Actually, it is not clear. Some some studies showed a clear correlation between CTG and brain damages, or CTG and neuropsychological scores, and some other they don't. And me personally, for example, we study cognitive functions with big batteries, and most of the time there is no correlation with CTG, but correlation with age and disease duration. So why is that? Because CTG is a defect. First of all, it depends on which CTG you take, because it has been shown that if you take the blood from the muscle, it's not going to be the same CTG number of repeats that in the brain. And even in the brain, it may be differences in the number of CTG depending on the region of the brain. So this is the first reason, I guess, why we don't see sometimes the link between CTGs and cognitive scores. And also, you know, there is another thing. You have a cell that has a problems in the brain, then it will lead to certain damage in the brain, and then this damage will lead to a certain you know, cognitive dysfunction. And it's 3 steps with complexity in between, because your brain can be damaged, but all the part of your brain will try, you know, to work for this part, and thus, you know, there is not so much cognitive dysfunction, you know. So you will see a brain that is damaged, but you will not really link it to cognitive dysfunction. Or sometimes there is a brain that is, you know, affected, but it's still working well in the function, but with time the functions start to decrease. So, but after I said all the scientist things, of course, even though the correlation is not perfect, of course, there is an association, and there is a reason why we observe cognitive deficits, brain damage, and of course, problems with the repeats in the cell. This is so this is clear, but yes, the link, the line is not perfect in between these 3 processes.
Dr. Gallais, thank you so much. I think we do have a few more questions. I wonder if perhaps we can share them with you offline, and you would be able to send information back to us in writing so that we can allow you to go on to your holiday weekend.
Thank you. Or maybe I will join in San Diego, and I'll be happy to answer to everybody. We'll see if I can make it. But no, I will. Yeah, I will totally. I will totally answer to anybody by writing in the future days.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gallais. Do you have some final words for us about this topic as we wrap up today?
Well, again, so first of all, it's always a good time to seek for support, emotional support, psychological support, and this is the main important thing. You could be living with the M1 or being a caregiver. It is very important. Look for social support, and I think MDF could be a very a good, you know, a good link for that. And also, you know, another thing is that more scientifically, we are working. You know, we described a lot, and I think now it's time to look at interventions and help people in daily life. And but the road is on, and we still need a little bit time just to prove what works better than another thing. We're on this way, and I will work hard for that for you, for everybody. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gallais. Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been recorded. You will be able to watch it again later. We're so grateful to you all. We hope you have a wonderful weekend.